Welcome to Inside the Director Circle, and this episode on increasing business value. And really what we want to do today is talk about the question. I think many leaders say that I'm not ready to exit or sell, so why should I be thinking about this now? So we're going to cover that off today. I'm Jason Langford Brown, founder of the Director Circle and practicing business advisor and coach and psychologist. What we see is running and growing your business does not always equate to creating or maximizing business value. And if you're thinking of exiting or selling, that obviously is a big problem. And I think, even wherever you are on the journey, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, even if you're not at the point where you're thinking about selling or exiting right now, there are lots of reasons to be thinking about it early or even from the very beginning. So we're going to cover that off today. And as always, we like to bring some expertise into the conversation. So today we're joined by Chasz Coulsting, who's the Director of Corporate Finance at Crowe UK. Crowe, one of the UK's leading audit, tax, risk and financial advisory firms. And Chasz himself, after an early career in insolvency, is now over 12 years experience in the corporate finance space. So I'm sure Chasz has got some great insights to share with you all today. Just before we get started, remember this is just a snapshot of what happens within the Director Circle. So if you want to get more involved in the business leader community that we run, just go on to directors-circle.com and get in touch. So Chasz, great to have you with us today.
Hi, Jason. Nice to be on today.
Appreciate you giving up your time. And I suppose just to kick us off today, and this is the first of two podcasts we're going to run with you. And I think probably when people think of corporate finance, they think about the notion of needing to raise money, either to sort of grow or scale their business, or to buy a business that's exiting or selling. But can you just give us maybe pick up the money point, but give us a kind of wider brief of what corporate finance is all about?
Yeah, no, of course I can. I kind of entered corporate finance, as you say, about 12-ish years ago, and kind of as the name suggests, it's all about raising money. But actually, a lot of what I do and a lot of what my colleagues do is actually, I guess, what we call M&A, which is a shorthand for mergers and acquisitions, which is basically buying and selling companies. So we act a lot for buyers as well as sellers. So large corporates looking to grow their businesses through acquisitions, and also most of the work I do is probably with, I guess, owner-manager businesses. So either family businesses or husband and wife businesses, and they're looking to sell and realize in most of the time, I guess, their lifetime's work really. And so I guess the term corporate finance is maybe a bit of a misnomer, because actually a large portion of what we do is selling people's businesses, whether that be the shares of your limited company or whether that be the business and assets. I think it's one term that can be confused with commercial finance, and commercial finance is definitely more about raising loans and what have you for kind of funding the working capital of a business or property loan, for example. That's not to say that we don't do any, we don't help finding funding for businesses. So, for example, if we were acting for a buyer, we'd help them find a loan to help fund the acquisition if they didn't have the cash reserves readily available. So I think that's a brief summary of what I do. So,
I love the term, realizing a lifetime's work. I think that is a really human way to put it for many businesses, because most businesses aren't big corporate, as you say. Even if they're beyond family, they're still usually owner managed or privately owned. And so I think that probably, I suppose the question for me there then is kind of what are the typically are, and I suppose particularly in an ideal scenario, what are the early conversations really all about? Because it probably isn't just about, it probably isn't about money at all then. It's what do you tend to be talking to directors about in those early phases of engagement?
Yeah, as with all things in life, I guess we talk to owner-managed businesses, all sorts of phases in their life, and some are much better at planning than others. And I guess quite a lot of the time we will have conversations with owners just I guess when they're ready to exit. So they may be 60, 70 and going, oh gosh, I haven't thought about retirement, and I'm getting a bit too old for this, and I need to get rid of this, or I need to find something to do with it, pass my business on to, or realize the value in it. On the other end of the spectrum, we do get people who are, actually who talk to us before they buy, they invest or buy into a business, and actually are already thinking about, what that exit looks like and how many years they want to be involved in that business and kind of, what they want to do afterwards. So I guess as in life, you get a broad spectrum of people. And I guess one of the things I guess you hear a lot in life, I guess particularly probably around pension planning more than anything else, is that it's never too early to start planning for these things. And the same is true of the same is true as I guess what we do in terms of helping people to sell their businesses. So I guess the earlier you can start the planning, the better. And it doesn't need much involvement, I guess, from us in the beginning. We tend to give a few tips and pointers and kind of set them on the way and catch up in a year or ever quarterly. And then as we get closer to, I guess, the predetermined point, or closer when they feel they want to retire or sell up, then those touch points become more regular. So.
Sure. Yeah. So as you're saying, getting involved early doesn't mean they've got, you've got to be, because business people are always so busy, aren't they? There's a big debate about whether they should be as busy as they are, but save that for another podcast maybe. But I think people think it's a distraction. It's time away from actually growing and running their business. I suppose what would be good to understand from your perspective is those people that engage late, and and obviously the extreme is that I want to retire, so it's almost like it couldn't be any later than that, could it really? But what's the frustrations for you in terms of doing your job well and adding the value you want to add for your clients when that happens?
I mean, I guess the frustration, not so much for me, but it's probably more for the client, really. I say, because they want to exit the business, and I guess they've been busy running their business, they've put their heart and soul into it, and then all of a sudden, they actually kind of, there's either been an illness in the family or something that's made them realize that actually, they want to enjoy the rest of their life and not spend 24/7 running the business. And I guess typically what you have in such scenarios is actually, because they've been so involved in running the business, there's not actually that many people, I guess one could call management team below them, who know, who know or have been given the responsibility to run the business, say, when they're away. So they basically want to go from a position of being kind of full-time 24/7 to kind of either fully retired or very little involvement in a business. And I think, I guess the frustration is trying to get from that point of full involvement to absolutely, well, close to zero very quickly. And there are buyers out there who if it's in the same industry and they know exactly what the business is running, they can add it on as a, I guess, that owner's business as a bolt-on to their own. But they have to be very well versed, and they probably have to have their own management team that can either expand their responsibilities to cover that new business unit or not. So what you're doing immediately is that you're limiting the pool of buyers that you have straight away.
Yeah.
And there's a few things that happen then. So you limit the chances that you'll have a successful sale of your business, but you're probably also going to limit the likelihood, your potential exit value. And because you're limiting your pool of potential buyers, actually that the exit process itself may take longer, because your limited pool of buyers may not be in a buying phase. So you tend to notice some PLCs might go through phases of acquisitions and then consolidation of those acquisitions. And if they've recently done a large acquisition, they might be in the consolidation phase. And so you may have to wait another 6-12 months before they're ready to do the next acquisition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's probably the frustration is, so just to, I guess, to boil down that question quickly, probably the key frustration for clients who kind of get to the point of wanting to retire is that it probably doesn't happen as quickly as they would like it to. Now they've reached the point of retirement, because I guess selling a business is a lot more. I mean, selling a house can take a while, but selling a business can take longer, because generally you've got a business, sometimes you've got property in there, so you've got almost sort of the property element, as well as you've got your employees, you've got your customers, your suppliers, and everybody that need to take along with the change of ownership event. So So yeah, that probably is the, I guess the key frustration, I guess the time and the and potentially the valuation expectation of people who haven't, I guess haven't planned ahead. So
Yeah, and I hear that time, that value, and you talked about a limited pool that could even equal no pool, or the people that are there not being ready. It's I think that's a really powerful message in terms of why it's worth getting on this early. I think you talked about the management team, and that is a key factor, and I suppose that's very much in the world I live in. And I think that's a massive underestimation for people. That you think you're right. A lot of businesses, they rely on their leader.
yeah.
And building a management team that's strong enough to run the day to day, and that in itself takes a lot of time, doesn't it? When in my world, where I'm working with leadership teams of businesses that are scaling, you can spend 2, 3, 4, 5 years really building a really, really strong independent management team. So yeah, to try and do that, in 6 months at the end is nigh impossible, really.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to, I suppose, just want to get your view, because when I think about that, I often say, and it was interesting listening to your perspective from a CF perspective, but when I talk to clients, when we're talking about scale, and some of them obviously potentially want to exit, I often say that the stuff that we're talking about doesn't mean you aren't going to be able to exit. But I loved your point about whether they can bolt it on, or whether they've got a management team that can cope. And I often see people will sell their businesses, but because it's a more difficult acquisition for them, what they do is they suppress the price. So I say to them, I'm not saying you won't sell your business, but they'll look at your business and go, because of how you look, how healthy you look, shall we say, this is more risky, this is going to take more work. So I still want to buy you, but I'm not going to pay as much. Is that something you see from a CF perspective?
Oh, absolutely. I think you've touched on a great point there. So yeah, it's not just limiting the pool's buyers. You're right. It's kind of that second point of suppressing value, but I guess it's suppressing that day one value. So what I guess what we'll see sometimes is, this a seller who wants to retire, wants to exit pretty quickly, but actually the only deal they've got on the table is one where they have maybe a bit upfront in terms of the value, but a lot of it's tied into a long-term consideration, which can either be called a deferred or an earn-out consideration in our world. And some of that's, the earn-out consideration tends to be linked to targets. So I guess, the intention of the buyer there is to basically say, well, we want to buy your business and we understand you want to retire, but we don't want you to retire for 2 or 3 years. And in that time, we want to make sure that the business doesn't fall off a cliff. And also in that time, one of the targets may be getting in a replacement management team. So some of the, your ultimate consideration, you may not be receiving into 2 or 3 years down the road, and they may be, subject to you hitting certain targets, which is a much, I guess, not as nice place to be as if, you'd had the majority of the consideration up front, without strings attached.
Or all of it.
Yes, indeed.
Indeed. And that's really interesting, Chasz, because I think that's the conversation I have nearly all the time with my clients. Is it's they want to exit completely, and in almost every instance I've seen in the last 30 years, there's always been some kind of tie-in. It's just a question of how big that tie-in was. Like you say, what percentage they got up front and what was on consideration, and how long they needed to hang around for, which all goes back to how well was your business structured, whereby the people buying your company felt, okay, we don't need you. And so I often say to business owners, you want to get to the point where actually you're almost retired before you sell.
Yes, that's a very good point. No, and I think, I guess we've been talking about the people who leave it till last minute, but actually, the people we do talk to, who talk to us 2 or 3 years beforehand, one of those key points of planning ahead is getting that management team in place, which is, I get, from what you're saying, is a key thing that you do. And there's obviously more than just a number of advantages that I'm going to point out, but I guess the advantages from a CF point of view is, the first thing is, by getting that management team in place, it actually allows that business owner to, well, first off, actually they can go on holiday, and the business won't fall apart when they go on holiday. And secondly, it allows us to have these strategy meetings with them and free up time for these sort of strategy meetings, because they know or they're in the process of getting a management team in place that can take those responsibilities off them. So it allows them more time to think about the strategy and then actually the planning and sort of, I guess the maximizing value, which I think is a topic you've got set out for our second episode. But it allows them to think about the strategic things. I guess it also allows them to think about, because one of the questions we ask is actually, what does your retirement look like to you? Because I know if I ask myself the question, if I was talking to an IFA the other day, I guess, and they're saying, if you want to retire at 60, what would you want to do? And I'll say, well, I wouldn't want to just play golf 5 days a week. I think I'd actually want to keep my brain engaged. And to be honest, that is probably quite a common theme you see amongst business owners, because their life and soul has been whatever they're being into. So, for example, one might be an engineer, and engineering is all he or she has ever done their whole life. So to go from 24/7 solving engineering problems in a business environment to all of a sudden sitting around the house, going fishing, golfing, or whatever they find time to do, may not actually be as enjoyable to them. So it's actually part of the planning of part of what we look to think about, as well as what they ultimately want out of it. And I think that can drive sort of how that plan for sale progresses, because if they've got a hobby that they really want to take up 24/7, or they're happy to fill their time because they've got other voluntary commitments, or whatever else it might be, then we can plan around putting a management team that fully takes away their responsibilities. So the plan is that they do absolutely nothing. But conversely, if they want to stay in the business but not be the key decision maker anymore, we can also plan around that, so that maybe they have a management team that takes away sort of those business management type roles from them, but they can stick to what they're good at, and I guess when they first started the business, what they wanted to do. So it's kind of stripped that back, really. So I think for us, that's a key important part of the planning, so that we kind of shape the business such that it's in a place that a buyer can pick it up without having to do too much to it. And as you were saying before, I guess the amount of value that you get up front, you tend to get a higher proportion up front where there's less that a business owner acquirer has to do to the existing business than post acquisition, really. So I think having that sort of plan in place for management and the continuity of the business really, as a help, increases that pool of buyers, because not only then are you looking for kind of trade buyers who are in the right point of their acquisition cycle, but there's also a huge amount of financial investors out there, particularly at the moment. I think I had a talk with I was at a talk with someone from private equity recently, and they'd done some statistics on private equity fundraising. So for those who don't know, private equity it's kind of core institutional buyers, financial buyers. So they raise funds from like pension funds or wealthy individuals to invest in companies and then make a return. But the private equity funds are probably sitting at the highest they've ever been at the moment. So there's plenty of capital in, I guess, financial buyers to make investments at the moment. So what you're doing by making your business able to run as a standalone, or you're enabling sort of these pool of buyers to come into the mix as well, and they have a huge amount of capital. And we have seen quite often that they actually outbid trade buyers.
Yeah.
So if you're looking, I guess if that valuation is, or price is, a sensitivity to you, then it helps bring those parties into the mix. I guess the other thing it does help bring as well is if you've got a management team in place that can run the business, it gives you the opportunity to, I guess, what you could do what people we term an MBO in the industry, which is a management buyout, where effectively the management team below you take the shares or the ownership of the business from you. That can be funded either by a financial buyer, or part of what we do is help raise, I guess, funding to assist with that, or to a certain degree, sometimes they can use their own funds, but usually we tend to find that, I guess, management teams don't have much by way of personal funds. So I guess what it really does, it helps really opens up all these options, which maybe weren't available if you were deeply into the running of the business and hadn't delegated anything, any responsibility to anyone else. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about, as you said, not being stuck in the weeds of the business and all those different opportunities. But I think the bit you pulled out there, which I really love, was this: there are human beings at this. These people that have built and grown their businesses, they are human beings. They've all got different journeys and different aspirations and different ways they want to spend their life. So obviously having options is a great thing. It's depending on what you want. And I think I was just going to add a couple of things to what you said. Is I see a lot. I think these business leaders really struggle with the notion of, I'm not now busy in the business. So, where's my worth? Am I adding value? I kind of judge my day by, I've done 12 hours a day and worked really hard. And of course, as a leader, you almost want to be at the point where you've got nothing to do. But I think as you put there, I think really important, I think, for them to recalibrate. It's not you've got nothing to do, you can do some different things. It might be you want to step away, but it might be actually I want to go back to my discipline of being I always just love being a tool maker, and I'd like to spend my time being a tool maker. Or it might be actually I want to spend my time working with guys like you to really maximize the value that I'm going to get for this business, because I want to do something else at the end of it. And so I think leaders to sort of pull themselves out, to give themselves the time and space to achieve whatever they want to achieve for their life, I think is a really powerful message. And we're probably on that one, Chasz. We'll probably call this first podcast we're doing you today to a halt. I hope some great insights in there. I think for those that are not that familiar with this world, I think some good pointers for people to start to understand some of the jargon and some of the things they need to be thinking about. I think I love this notion of essentially being ready for sale and starting early. If nothing else, because it maximizes the people and the channels to sale, but also increases the value and reduces the amount of time it takes. I think that just that in itself was a really, really powerful insight. So thank you for joining us today, Chasz. We'll see you on our second episode with you, where we're going to talk about, I think what we're going to try and do, Chasz, just try and drum out some top tips for people on how they can really grasp this journey, and I want to share with the listeners a bit of the untold secret, I think, of creating business value. But until then, thank you for joining Inside the Director's Circle.
Thank you, Jason.